My name is Daniel Albino. I'm 27-year-old, and I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I have been shunned.
All right, Dan. So, how did you become one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
So I'm a third generation Jehovah's Witness. My grandparents were Catholic. Uh, when I wasn't even born yet, they were Catholic, and then I think one of Jehovah's Witnesses started talking with my grandmother, and that's how the religion was introduced into our household. I know that my mother, literally, she remembers celebrating at least one Christmas when she was little. So after that, they haven't celebrated Christmas ever again. My mother uh, is one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Her sister, my aunt, is another Jehovah's Witnesses, and those are the two active witnesses in my family. And we have a cousin from another uncle that is also one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but she's not very close with our family. So
Okay.
that's pretty much our family background right
All
there.
right. So now you didn't mention your father in there, and I don't know if he's out of the picture or was he one of Jehovah's Witnesses
So
or.
that's part of the story. So my mother, um, and I'm not gonna go very deep into it because I don't want her to be hurt or anything by that. But my mother made a decision, just like I pretty much made a decision myself. She fell in love with my father, and here I am. And because of that situation, she was shunned for 5 years.
Hmm.
5 years that nobody talked to her, nobody will say anything to her. Only a few brothers here and there and in the religion will see her in the meetings and say, "We're glad that you're here." But for 5 years, she was shunned. And she was, and I'm not going to make the story about her, but she will used to go to every meeting. We know how the shunning process go, and you have to go to every single meeting and every single little, assembly and the memorial and the everything. So she went every single one of them for 5 years, and she wrote letters, and she was never reinstated after 5 years later. So it was a tough time for my mom.
And so first of all, let me just say that 5 years of doing all the things that they want you to do, um, that almost speaks to some elders who were personally mad. This was more personal for them to keep her on the hook for 5 years. That's a long time.
Yes. So it's funny because my mother wasn't the first one to leave. It was all a chain of progression. My grandfather failed his wife, my grandmother, and he was an elder at the time, and he got this fellowship. And after that, my mother came to the States for 3 years, and she lived in New Britain, Connecticut, and she literally went through all of that by herself. And one thing that I have learned from my experience and many others that I have heard on your podcast is that once you leave your home base to another language or another country, it's easier to leave the religion. It's like the chains are broken a little bit, and it doesn't take a lot to take you out of it,
Yeah,
if we're
absolutely.
being honest with it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now this was at the beginning of your life when she was shunned. So
Correct.
so
5 years.
wow, that's so tough.
And I didn't know about it because I was a little kid. You
Yeah.
don't see it. I know that uh, when I start reflecting on it, my aunt was the only one carrying me around to have the brothers pick me up and play with me and all this and all that. And I was always wondering why my mom is sitting by herself. Why am I only with her? But I never knew. It takes time to get to know that, as you grow, that's when you get to know why that happened.
And
Yeah.
can I say that that is a beautiful point to share. There are a lot of people who have children, sometimes young children, and maybe they're shunned, and their parents may come get the kids and take them to meetings or whatever the case is. I mean, you're proof that the kids notice. The children know what's up. They may not understand it all, but they know it's weird. I mean, you're talking the first 5 years of your life, and even then you could tell something was off. Why is my aunt doing this? Why am I being separated from my mom in this way?
Yeah.
So it just shows how insidious that control is when Jehovah's Witnesses get in there, even with little kids.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because my grandfather was disfellowshipped as well by that time. And because my mom was disfellowshipped, she could visit him and talk to him because they supported one another.
Right.
And I remember my mom leaving me with my grandpa, rest in peace. And he will take care of me with the woman he was with at the time. Very nice lady, by the way. And I remember this green little house, since I'm from Puerto Rico originally, this green wooden house, and I will go and be so happy to be with my grandpa. It was such a great time. But if my mom was reinstated before that, that probably would have never happened. And I'm happy that it did. I'm happy that it did.
Yeah, it gave you that opportunity. So growing up, so this is interesting on even another level, because I always ask people what the worldview was that they were given as a kid growing up.
Right.
For at least the first several years, you kind of had a little different worldview, you had a little different view than other people. So what was it like for you growing up? How were you made to kind of see the world around you?
So it was interesting because I think after my mom was reinstated, everything changed in a way, but it still wasn't completely religious, if I will say so myself. Like, my mom, after those 5 years, went into that very depressive state. She had health conditions also that contributed to it. So we weren't regulars at first in the meetings. My grandmother, however, she was very, very zealous in the religion. She was very, very, into it. And whenever I remember my grandmother, when my grandfather did what he did, she moved to another town. Excuse me. And that town was like an hour away from the hometown where I lived in Guanica, Puerto Rico. And the other town was called Coamo. And every weekend was literally the only time I got to be exposed to the religion. Because in the weekdays, my mom wouldn't take me, or if she would, I don't remember very well because I was young. But it was weird. It was just weird. It was like I was a normal kid, but I wasn't a normal kid, so to speak. So it's now that I think about it, it's one of those things that I cannot explain in words. It's kind of hard to explain. At least that beginning part of my childhood. Yeah.
It's confusing. You're so young and you're caught in between different worlds.
Yeah.
You're just a kid, so you have no tools. You have no experience to rely on to, pull any perspective from. So yeah, it's got to be extremely confusing for a child. So what was life like for you growing up? Let's just go with at first at school. What was it like for you in school growing up as a witness?
Oh, this is where it starts to get interesting, right? So school, I always wanted to be the kid that fit in. And that's everybody. I have heard many stories that's every single kid in the world. Everybody wants to fit in. but I always knew I was the ugly duck in the room. I always knew I was different. In school, it was one of the most interesting things because I was bullied a lot for the way I was, for the way I acted. I tried a few times to preach in school when I was younger. I think that was when I did it the most. And I had a lot of fights in school, whether you believe it or not, because there was this elder that literally told me, you know, Jesus loved living people. So if they're trying to hurt you, you have to punch back. And I'm like, whoa, elder, you're telling me something I shouldn't do. What the heck? But that helped me fence up for myself. But I always knew I was the ugly duck in the room. Whenever there was a birthday, you have to be outside of the classroom. You know, your little classmate wanted you to be part of her or his birthday, and you couldn't. And they will ask you why, and you're like, well, because I'm not supposed to celebrate it. And then I appreciated my teachers, though, because they used to take me outside and they say, wait outside, but here's a piece of the cake. Since you're not inside, eat it. So my teachers were very, very kind, but it was hard. It was hard because I know many Puerto Rican Christmas songs because there was music class and you had to practice them. And even though I couldn't sing them, you will hear them all the time. So you learn them by heart and you couldn't sing them. There was times that they will bring you a paper and there was a Christmas drawing and you had to color it as a way to pass time. You know, it was those days in school that they don't study. It's more like a festivity kind of feel. And I couldn't paint them. So my teacher had to literally grab another page of another coloring book so that I could color. That's how it was in school. It was very uncomfortable. And, you know, no matter how normal I felt, because after a while you get used to it. But at first it was hard. It was hard. Not saying hello, like not saluting the flag. Yeah, it was interesting time in school when I was young.
Absolutely. It just sets you up from the beginning to be different. You know that you're supposed to be different. And now this is confirmation every day that you go to school that you are different. You aren't like everybody else. And you know, every child, I don't care who they are, wants to be like their peers. Every person wants to, every adult wants to be like someone, you know, in their peer group. So it's a cults, religions that use control like this, they take a lot of natural things and make them seem unnatural. You know,
Correct.
just like a desire to fit in, they try to make that feel unnatural, and it's a way of controlling people. So, what about at home for you? What was life like at home growing up, especially, you know, once your mom was reinstated? You know, you said that it wasn't, you know, intensely religious there at first. You know, she had her own issues, but how was life kind of growing up at home? What was the environment like?
So it's interesting because my household was always filled with love. My mom did the best that she could as a single mother to be there for me, to be there with me. Even till this day, which we're going to get into it later, she's still my best friend. There's no one besides my fiance that has that big influence on me. And it's interesting because I was allowed to see TV and, you know, and be a kid, but there were some other things that I wasn't allowed to. Like, for example, there were times I will see kids playing basketball in the street. And I will look from the window and I'm like, I want to play basketball with the kids. Because that's my favorite sport. That's literally, I see a basketball and I'm like, this is, if I wasn't a Jehovah Witness, I will be an NBA player right now, because that was my passion. I had a cousin that died playing basketball because somebody killed him. But he taught me how to play it. So because of him, I'm like, I want to be like him. I want to play ball and I want to enjoy it. So it has always been my primary sport, even though my grandpa was a baseball player before he was a witness. But anyways, it was hard because I wanted to play with the kids. And I'm like, man, I want to play with the kids. And my mom will be like, no, you can't go out with them. They're worldly kids. And, they're influenced, and, that Satan. And it was hard. And then after a while, so to keep going to the story about my grandma, a few months after my grandpa passed away, my grandmother passed away. And my grandmother used to live with mom's sister, my aunt. And my aunt used to work in a company. That company went bankrupt. It was destroyed. So she's like, well, I'll take up full-time ministry. So she lived in that town, Coamo, in Puerto Rico, for a few years with a sister. And then she decided that she will come and live with us. So my family, my household didn't have a dad, but I had two moms per se. And that's when things started changing, because my mom wasn't as zealous in the Jehovah Witness things. She will stay home, no go to any meeting at all, only go to the memorial and the assemblies. That's it. Once my aunt came home, things changed, because she was the pioneer. She saw that I was the one that wasn't I was the future, and I wasn't doing anything about it. I wasn't going to the meetings. I wasn't going on the ministry. And, it started to get harder from there. I remember one time I was I still am a huge anime fan. Mm-hmm. I love anime. And especially I love Dragon Ball Z. Everybody does, especially kids in the 90s. We love that stuff. So I had this sticker album that a kid gave me. And it was about Dragon Ball Z. And I remember my mom used to take me to a babysitter because she had to work. So she couldn't take care of me and pick me up in school and all that. So my mom arrived to pick me up from the house of this sister, who later became a sister. And she saw the Dragon Ball Z album. And I think that was one of the most traumatic experiences I had as a child, because she ripped it to pieces. She literally just grabbed it and ripped it and just, bam, right in front of me. I was crying and screaming because I was in love with it. And I told my mom, but when I go to your aunt's house, I see it. Oh, you see it there? Okay, we'll take care of that too. So it was tough, because then it became more religious, a little bit more. And it was mostly based on my aunt and not mostly on my mother. I know she was trying to do the right thing due to our beliefs, but it was really painful. It was one of the worst things I went through as a kid with her,
Oh, wow. I really feel you there. You can, how old were you when the Dragon Ball Z thing got ripped up?
I think I was in either second or third grade.
So you were what, like 8, something like that? Oh, that's terrible. And it's like you said, your mom didn't have malice in her heart. She thought she was doing the right thing.
Correct.
But you see the unnecessary pain that children are put through in the organization, where the organization, Jehovah's Witnesses like to brag a lot about how they protect kids from pain. How being a young witness is a protection. But actually, you end up getting hurt in a lot of really deep ways when you don't fit in with your peers, when normal kid things like Dragon Ball Z are being destroyed in front of you. And I really feel you on the basketball thing, man. I remember that kids would play in the alley behind my street. And like you, I loved basketball. It's all I wanted to do was play basketball. And I remember crying one time after I begged my parents to let me go play out in the alley with the kids out there. It was just a hoop on somebody's garage. The kids asked me to play.
Yeah.
All I wanted to do was play ball with kids. I didn't want to go run drugs. I just wanted to play basketball.
I know. Yeah.
It's crazy the way things are equated inside the organization, and the way it really pushes you away from your peers and makes you feel alone. But it's just sad to see, to think of an 8-year-old kid going through these types of things.
Yeah.
And most of us did at some point, most all of us did.
Yeah. It was crazy because I remember all the way through middle school. I mean, this is where it got really hard because middle school is bully ground. That's middle school or junior high, however we call it here. We knew it was bully time. It was time to get bullied. It was time to fight back or be quiet. And it was a transition time. And I remember my first exposure to pornography. And this is a topic that is very, very, it has a lot to do with my exiting the Jehovah Witness. So we'll go from here.
All right.
So I had this kid, now I'm not going to mention his name, but very good kid, very good friend, worldly kid, but a very respectful one. My mom knew his mom because we used to, if you search Guanica, Puerto Rico, is a small town and everybody knows everybody. So this kid one day, he's like, hey, Daniel, look at this. And back then we had the flip phone, so you could, and it was like a 10 or 15-second video. That's all it took to destroy my sexual education through a video like that. But at the same time, that's all it took to that becoming that thorn in the flesh that Paul talked about in the Bible that will never go away without a fight. And it was interesting because for years I hid that problem. And my mom knew about it. I mean, parents are not dumb. They know what you're going through, and they suspect things. And I went through that by myself. And, and I don't blame my mother. My mom did all she could, and I'm ever grateful to her. But there were things that I wish I would have learned differently. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that I wish I would have learned differently. I remember, and I don't know if I can say those words here, but
you say it's a podcast. You can.
All right. So I remember this kid. He was a 9th grader because in Puerto Rico is 7 through 9 middle school, or it used to be. Oh. So later it changed to a more American version of it. But when I was in school in the 2000s, it was 7 through 9. So there was this 9th grader that I was friends with. And he's like, oh, you're such a pussy. And I'm like, what's a pussy? and everybody's going to laugh because, I was a 13-year-old in 7th grade. I didn't know what that was. And then all of a sudden, they're laughing at me. I felt it was very embarrassing. And one of the kids that was kind enough, he drew me aside. He's like, "Do you know what a vagina is?" I'm like, "Yeah, we talk about that in health class. That's what a pussy is." Oh, and you could tell that I was innocent. Like my mind was completely pure. That's a miracle nowadays. Being a 13-year-old with a pure mind, that's a miracle. But
Yeah.
for me, that was the case. There was no sexual education, and that became a problem. Because then in middle school, everybody wanted to kiss, everybody wanted to touch, everybody wanted to experience. And I knew somehow it was wrong, but I didn't know why it was wrong. And that's one of the things that it bothered me for years. And I'm glad that my fiance and I are very honest. Like that was one of my biggest problems growing up, and still today I fight with it probably every single day. Yeah.
Sure. I never really, I guess, thought about this. I think I was fortunate a little bit because, in a way, I guess, as fortunate as you can be being raised in that environment. But I was about 8 or 9 by the time my parents started studying and became witnesses. And I had been, I don't know, I had been exposed to, I guess it was pornography when I was a little kid. I had seen a magazine, kid brought to school or something. I don't honestly remember exactly, but I was worldly wise for an 8-year-old, I guess. I knew
That's
what was
good.
up.
In a sense, that's good.
Yeah, so I mean, believe me, I got bullied relentlessly in middle school myself. I get it, but I did at least know what they were talking about. If they called me a pussy, I at least knew what they were saying.
Right, right, right.
It's funny, the things that matter when you're that age. And
Yeah, that's true.
those images are, they're a lot for a kid, and they stick in your mind because these are adult matters being foisted on a child, and a child doesn't know how to handle that.
Correct.
And so, in my life, I struggled with it too at times because it was something that was there, and it's visually stimulating, and you don't know anything about this thing because no one is telling you anything.
Correct.
Again, something natural being made unnatural and being made shameful in a way that in the organization really takes a toll on people. Because you have a lot of people that, if they did explore in a way like what you're talking about, maybe feel shame about it. Well, heck, every talk that ever mentioned sex was about shaming it. It was always, I mean, even among married people, let the marriage bed be without defilement. Like, it was always in a shaming way. So then you have people who get married, and then suddenly on their wedding night, it's supposed to be okay. And you can't
Right.
just, and so you have a lot of sexless marriages in the organization because people feel so much shame around it. And you have people who go toward promiscuity because they just go the opposite extreme. When you put people in this kind of pressure cooker, and you don't, especially young people who don't have healthy tools, and they're not allowed to explore these subjects in a healthy way, it creates all kinds of problems.
It will blow up in your face.
Yep.
Literally, it's funny because by that time I was starting to have responsibilities in the congregation. Like when I was 12 years old, a year before I started being exposed to middle school, I started in the theocratic ministry school back then. And I remember this elder who wanted me to be a reader, because I was always very enthusiastic. I wanted people to recognize me. I will always sit in the front row to try to pay attention to the speaker. I was the guy that was trained to write scriptures. I heard this in another podcast, and I started laughing because I'm like, that was me. That was me. I will write every scripture that they will tell from the platform and be like, hey, the podium, and look for Matthew 10, verse 10, and I will be the one writing it down. And I was very into it because there were some facets of it that I really enjoyed. And so how does those two things tie in together is what happens when you have responsibilities and then you have an addiction in your hands, especially an addiction of that sorts. That's when it gets complicated, because I was starting when I started in 8th grade. I started to be a rebel, sort of. In Puerto Rico, there's this hip hop kind of music called reggaeton, or like what we call in Puerto Rico now is urbano. And the dances was mostly sexual. It was like, rubbing each other and the clothes and all that. And man, that was exciting as a teenager. I never danced it. I think I danced it twice in my lifetime before leaving the Witnesses. But it was the trend. But because I didn't fit in, I'm like, well, maybe I'll listen to reggaeton, and I'll dress this way, and kids in school will start loving me, and they will start to, take notice. It happened the total different story. It was more like he's trying to fit in too hard, and everybody will make fun of me. Everybody will be like, oh, look at him. He's trying to think that he's a rapper when he's not. He's a little religious person. And, this skinny guy, ugly guy, stupid guy, blah, 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 blah. That gets to you. I always told people, the more you tell somebody something consistently, that person will start to believe it. So I started to believe I was stupid, and I started to believe I was ugly, and I started to believe that I didn't have value. And I think that was the darker side of society. So I was like, okay, you want to be that way? Fine. I'll go the opposite direction. I'll be a freaking rocker. So I started wearing a bracelet and jean chains, and they still mocked me, because in Puerto Rico, rockers are dumb. They don't look at them with kind eyes. Like, it's not the trend. So they will put my chain around the chair. When I got up, the chair will get up with me. They will, try to call me gay and weirdo. And I think the rocker persona that I used to do, it was influenced on WWE, because somehow I got away with watching WWE. And there was this, I love this guy, this wrestler, probably you have heard of him, Chris Jericho. Mm-hmm. And he's now in AEW, another wrestling company, and he's the main guy. And I remember in 2007, he came back to wrestle after 5 years of not wrestling. And he came in with a jean chain and black pants. And he had this sweater on that it was all sparkly, and his hair was spiky. And I'm like, I want to be that dude. I want to look cool. I want to walk with that confidence. So I started imitating him. Everything he will do, his tone of voice and all that, like, I became Chris Jericho. And I did that because I felt I didn't have an identity. I felt like I couldn't be me at all. And it was funny, because they're like, oh, there he goes again. He thinks it's Chris Jericho. And I'm like, yeah, I'm Y2J, baby. And I will be like very excited and, and doing this mannerism like he used to do. And that was my fiance called it like my mask. That was a way for me to protect myself from the world. When he became a world champion, I used to carry my backpack like it was a championship on my shoulder. That was a way to pick myself up. It wasn't Jehovah. It wasn't the organization. It was just my imagination and a little bit of, hey, if nobody will pick me up, I will pick myself up and I will see the coolest guy in the room and I will imitate what he does. And people to this day still remember that, you know, like, oh, you used to run like Naruto, or you used to walk like Chris Jericho, or you were this guy who was obsessed with Mega Man. And I take it as a compliment because that's what I did to survive in middle school. And it's interesting and bizarre at the same time while I'm saying it. That's the way I could cope with all this shit.
Yeah, honestly, I'm finding it's kind of beautiful, you know, just in a way, the innocence of a child, a kid trying to make it through, trying to find ways to fit in or be cool. And although you were kind of adopting them as your identity, you were at least picking the things you liked. You weren't just latching on to random things. You're
Yes.
picking the things you liked, that you were showing, you really kind of were showing who you were in a way. Obviously, trying to do that to middle school kids is, you know, goes right over their head. They're not that deep, but it's interesting that, so you were adopting those personas as your identity. Now, on the other hand, as you grow up, one of Jehovah's Witnesses want you to adopt them as your identity. So how did that fare for you when you were at the Kingdom Hall, you know, carrying your book bag, Y2J, baby? Whatever, like, how is that going?
No, it's funny because Y2J, I think it was 2008 or 2009, he changed his character.
Okay.
He became more like a maniacal suit guy. Like he will wear a suit and talk really slow and take a look at the room and be like, and I literally will do that. I will have the microphone and I have my suit and I'll be like, here's the microphone, you know, and that was me, and they will think it's weird. And, you know, and then I think after that, so in 2009, we all know Michael Jackson died. I think it was 2009. And that was another way for me to cope. So Michael Jackson, I learned that he was raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And I downloaded his autobiography called Moonwalk. And I started reading through it. And I remember that there was this line that he literally started walking around town at night when nobody will be there because he was too famous. And he will walk around and look around and be like, I wish I could be normal so that people could talk to me as a normal human being. And I remember reading those lines and being like, damn, that's me. I've gone through that. And that was one of the things that I don't condemn if he did those stuff that they say he did or not. We don't know. He's dead already. I don't condone sexual abuse and any sort of, especially child abuse. I don't condone those things. But back then, knowing that a guy like him went through the same issues I did, that was another identity I took up for myself. I started learning his dance routines and started, you know, doing the hee, you know, like sort of stuff and all that. That was a way for me to like continue. And I remember one time, at this time, I was already starting to be a Jehovah Witness for real. And I remember one time, I'm like, hey, God, like Jehovah, if Michael didn't do the things he did, or they say he did. Can you bring him back to paradise? Because, supposedly death covers all sins and he already died. So I want to see him. I want to talk to him, and I want to be like, what was it for you to be divided between your father, who wanted to be a billionaire, and your mother, who was a cold believer as a Jehovah's Witness? What was that like? How did it affect you? I wanted to know him as a person. And I thought that the only way I could do that was if God brought him back from the dead, as we used to believe. So, so this is where things starts to get interesting. The witnesses start noticing the behaviors, and they start seeing that I don't progress further. Like, I'm not answering in the meetings, I'm not commenting in them. There's days that I don't want to be there, so I don't go to the meetings. There's days I don't go to preach door to door. So,
were you baptized at this point? So were you baptized at this point, or?
I got baptized, I think 2008.
Okay.
So that I was baptized when Michael Jackson was dead.
Okay.
I got baptized at 15-year-old because I knew that it was a big decision. I knew that it was something that would literally change my life, and I was afraid of failing because I knew I was failing already, but I was afraid of committing the ultimate sin.
So you say you knew it would change your life. How? Not how did you know, but how did you think it was going to change your life? Like, a lot of people, so you've talked already about the porn issue a little bit. Like, did you think it was going to cover that over and kind of make it all good, or you wouldn't have that problem anymore or anything? Or no?
Well, first of all, I got baptized because I like a girl and I was trying to impress her.
Okay. All right.
So that's the first thing. I but I still knew it was serious. I knew, and the reason why I knew is it was based out of fear. If I screwed up, everything will be gone. My friends, my family, everything would be gone. So I knew that, yeah, I was doing this to impress this Bible student that I liked. But at the same time, I was conscious of the consequences, not fully aware of how it would affect me, but I knew somehow that it would. And this was a conversation I used to have to some of my friends who got baptized, and they will tell me the same fears that I had, and I feel bad for them now because they're witnesses now. But I think some of us that got baptized when we were 15, 16, 17, and 18, we knew what we were getting into. And if we failed, we kind of knew the consequences, of those actions. So it was based out of fear.
Yeah. And I do think that you do know, on an intellectual level what the consequences are, but I don't think emotionally anyone at that age can actually understand what the consequences are. There's a big difference between knowing if I do this, this is a potential consequence, and then actually understanding at that age and being of an age to make that decision. It's one of the things that really irritates me about the witnesses is that, so you don't, on one hand, they brag about not sprinkling children and baptizing children.
Correct.
We wait until people actually, are the age of understanding and they know. Yeah, but the people who sprinkle kids, they're not shunning them for the rest of their life for a decision they made as an adolescent. So let's not pat ourselves on the back too hard, because you're kind of, it's a real tough thing to do to people, to then let's just say shunning children is a dick move. don't do that to kids, and don't do that to adults who were kids when they made this decision. It's a ridiculous it's a ridiculous paradigm to say, well, you were 15, you knew the consequences. Yeah, 15-year-olds know the consequences of lots of things and still do dumb things.
Oh yeah.
15 years old. So let's not use what they knew as an excuse, like it somehow justifies your bad behavior as an adult later for shunning people. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. So where was I?
Well, so you were talking about how the congregation was starting to, because I'd asked if you were baptized. You were talking about how the congregation was starting to take notice of your behaviors and starting to kind of question because you weren't really being regular at meetings and stuff.
Right. So there was this brother. I love him to death. He been there for me more than any other elder have ever been there for me. And he knew something was up. And I think that genuinely he was really trying to help me. Like, I will never question his methods, even though, we were all brainwashed, so to speak. But he noticed, and he talked to a circuit overseer. And this is what I used to take as a sign from heaven. Because it's funny, because he prayed to Jehovah, and then I prayed to Jehovah because I knew I was getting deep into the problem. Like, I was seeing this stuff every day, probably 3, 4, or 5 times a day, probably more. I was bad. It was bad. It was an addiction.
Sure.
So I was like, I need help. I need help. I want to do the right thing. Even though I didn't get baptized for the right reason, I still wanted to be a good Jehovah's Witness. So we were preaching, and I remember the area like yesterday. We call it Cuesta Blanca, or White Hill. And it was a territory in Guanica, in my hometown. And we were preaching, and the circle overseer came to visit. And we were doing door to door. And I think by this time I was already almost out of high school. Almost. Probably I was in senior year, if I'm not mistaken. So he talks to me, and he's like, there's many people that have been doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and people that watch sort of entertainment can become like Ted Bundy and become serial killers and rapists, and this sort of video stuff can turn you into a very bad person. And God, Jehovah God loves you very much, and and it's good that you ask for help, and this and this and that. By the way, I never told him I was watching pornography.
Yeah.
It never came out of my mouth. They somehow miraculously knew that I was deep in it. But, addictive behaviors are very easy to detect sometimes. So but then he cried, and he's like, you're going to fall and you're going to get back up again. And this is not the first time you're going to fall. And Jehovah and Jesus love you very much. And he had, all the while, he had good, cool black sunglasses and a tear in his eyes rolling from his cheek. So I took it as a sign from Jehovah. I was really excited to talk. So I went to the elders. I told them. 2 elders sit down with me. And this meeting went pretty well. They gave me, obviously, articles to read. Pray about it every single time. Read, as if anything is going to be solved by reading. And then we'll keep tabs on how you're doing. I cut the internet of my house. I told mom, cut the internet. I don't want internet. I blocked my phone, my tablet, my PSP, everything. I did everything I could to prevent from falling again. I think it passed like 3 months, and I was on pay-per-view, and I saw a movie.
Yeah.
And I told mom, I was crying because I wanted to do the right thing. I honestly wanted to avoid this sort of behavior. So I went to mom, and this is where mom and I, we developed it before, because I have another story before this time, but I think this is the more important story. So I'll share this first. But my mom gained my trust from the very beginning. My mom listened to me, and she's like, you're gonna be okay. Just what do you want to do? She led it up to me. She didn't tell me go to the elders. She didn't tell me talk to somebody. She told me, what do you want to do? And then I said, I want to talk to the elders because I felt I couldn't do the right thing. So she's like, okay. So we went together. And that was hard. That was the hardest. I think the second meeting was the hardest one of them all, because I went in there and I told him, hey, I blocked the internet. I disconnected. Like, we literally took the service away. We did this, we did that. And I still felt. And they were like, the same routine, pray with me, more reading, more praying, more this. But then one of them said, well, Daniel, this time, if you fall again, you're going to be facing a judicial committee.
3 strikes, you're out.
3 strikes, you're out. Because we've been very merciful on you. And Jehovah has been very merciful on you. And if you don't face this and you don't work on it, you're going to be disfellowshipped.
But you did face it and you did work on it. You got rid of everything in your house. I mean, you know, that is...
Yeah, so so I went home and I was destroyed, because this time they took me not commenting in the meetings, which I love to do, me not preaching. I mean, preaching, yeah, I could preach, but I couldn't pass microphones. People could barely talk to me outside of the Kingdom Hall. It was privately reproved. And people will come to me and ask me, hey, why aren't you doing the microphones anymore? Oh, no, I just took some time from doing it. I don't want to do it for a while because I don't feel like doing it for a while. That was the excuse I used. It hurt. It hurt because it was almost like a pre-shunning sort of deal. It was like a prototype to shunning. And I was like, God damn it. Like, I worked so hard for this. And people outside don't understand this, but you and I both know that passing microphones for us was a huge deal.
Yep.
So, of all of this, I think the elders visited me just once after that. Both times that I was in private with them. After, one time. And I was like, how am I going to beat this with no help? So I did what probably nobody else will do. I became the best Jehovah Witness I could be. I went into the Bible. I grabbed a notebook. I studied. I read and I was like, I became so knowledgeable that people will look at me and they were like, man, you almost are like an elder. And I did it by myself because I knew that I had to get out of that situation no matter what.
Essentially, you replaced one addiction with another.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it just shows that's how it works. Most people, when they get into some sort of trouble or whatever, they double down. It's the natural response. Well, I'm not good enough. So what can I do to be good enough? I can just go all out on study and service and whatever, because you think that is going to fix it. So it really kind of works. That's why this discipline that they put on people works in their favor, because it
Right.
makes people try
Harder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, then it was, there's so much I could, like I tell people my story or parts of my story and they tell me you could write a freaking book. Like literally, like I have more stuff. But the elder that taught to me first, he wasn't involved in neither situation with the 2 or 3 elders or whatever. And he fell in love with a younger person, like a 16, 17-year-old. And he was 20 in his 20s. So he was waiting for her to grow up so, you know, he wouldn't get in trouble and they wouldn't get in trouble and all that. And I saw his human side. And he came to me as a friend, and I'm not gonna say his name, but he came to me as a friend, and he's like, "Hey, Daniel, I fell in love, and this is what I'm going through, and this is not right, but damn, man, like, I love her, I care about her, and I known him for years, so I knew he was being sincere with me. Keep in mind, he was an elder, regular pioneer. He was the service, overseer. He had a lot of talks and all this. He lost it, all of it. Because he told them, I love this woman and I want to be by her side. And I don't care. I'll do what I have to do. I'll wait 10 years if I have to, but I'll be with this person. And that moment, he was the one I was aspiring to be. I wasn't mad at him because I knew I've been through it too. I dated a worldly person before becoming a serious Jehovah Witness who confessed his pornography addiction. But he was my rock. Besides God, he was the one who was always there, who would wake me up in the morning to go into ministry with him. He was one of the ones that inspired me to do this on my own, because he told me they see you as a lost cause. And I probably am the only one who wants you to be back in this. Like, I want you to be back in the fight. And I think that he genuinely believed in me, and he genuinely, due to his programming, thought that that was the best thing for me. So when I saw him go down, I was like, what now?
So did he get disfellowship for doing something with this person?
No. He got reproved. So he lost the responsibilities because he didn't do anything intimate. It was just pure getting to know the person. That was all it was.
But she also was underage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of an issue.
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
it. That was the issue. Yeah.
yeah, okay. Yeah. He's got his own issues.
Yeah.
That yeah.
Yeah. So
I
that,
think something you were gonna say. You said you talked about him wanting to wait for her, to become of age.
yeah.
That happens a lot, and when you really, as a person, after you get out and you think about that, that is weird. That is so strange for people to
That
be
happened
doing.
to me. That happened to me.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's the situation that, again, that environment makes people do things that they wouldn't do otherwise. It puts people in weird positions. And of course, maybe cultural differences too, being in a
Yeah.
different place than here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in Puerto Rico, obviously, is the same as the U.S. I mean, you cannot date an underage. That's for damn sure.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's more like, well, if they love each other, and they genuinely care about one another, and they don't cross the line, then we'll allow them to see each other, at least talk, because we're talking from countries like Mexico and Puerto Rico and the Hispanic culture, where people in the past used to get married really young. So it's not as wrong as it probably would be here in Washington State, or any other state for that matter, but it definitely wasn't right. So obviously he went through that, but the thing was that he never tried to hide it, and that was a good thing. He was trying to be responsible in the sense like, hey, I screwed up, I have feelings, I'll talk to my best friend about it. And I felt for him because I understood, because I was kind of jumping to the same situation myself. But that's a subject for another day. But yeah, so right after that, they lift up my responsibilities and they give them back to me. And I worked hard and hard and hard and hard. And what was it? I became auxiliary pioneer, like monthly, right? So I was doing 50 hours every month and I loved it. Like I said before, we were talking before this, I love people and I love talking to them, and I enjoyed it. And then I went forward with that, and I wanted to be a regular pioneer. And this is where the other issues came about. So I requested being a pioneer in January of 2000, and I think it was 14 or 15, 2015. Because in 2014, I went to New York on a trip to the Bethel branches back then. In 2015, January, I requested to be a regular pioneer. And by this time, the circuit overseer and I were really good friends, in the sense that he, besides the friend that I talked about, he was the other person I really looked up to, because he was easy to talk to, a good listener, and he would try to help me the best way that he could. So I sent the request to the elders. I send we have request phones, like if we were going to a university or whatever. And then 3 months passed, nothing. Not a yes, not a no. I will ask and ask and ask and ask, and nothing and nothing and nothing and nothing. So I went to the circuit overseer. I'm like, well, if this inept elders don't do anything about it, I will. So I went to the circuit overseer, and I'm like, hey, I sent this request in January, and it's March, I still haven't heard anything from them. He's like, hey, well, the elders are worried about your porn usage, and if you fall into that again, and have you? And I'm like, well, thank you for being honest with me, but no, of course I was lying.
Sure.
You know?
Everyone lied on a lot of things.
I was lying, because it wasn't as bad as it used to be, but it was still there. So anyways, don't know. I don't feel bad about it. I think I can do this. I want to do this. Please help me out. He's like, oh, okay, I'll sit down and talk to them. So it was Thursday, and they came to me and they're like, hey, you've been approved to be a regular pioneer. And honestly, if I could be a regular pioneer and not a Jehovah Witness, I will be the happiest man in the world. Like visiting houses and just saying hi to people and giving them something that they enjoy, I will be the happiest man alive. That was the moment when I was the happiest, because I honestly felt I was helping people. I felt I was genuinely saving life. And this other day, I tested Amber Scora about this, because I have her on Facebook, and I tested her. Hey, thank you for the book. I've been listening to it. It's really amazing, and this and this. And there's a point that she says the same. Like, I felt I was helping people, so here I am in China, and I wasn't. That's exactly what I went through. It was like, holy shit. Like, I loved this part of the ministry. I hated the congregation. I honestly hated the gossip. I hated the meetings. I didn't want to deal with childish behavior from the brothers and sister. Like, look, this brother taught this behind my back. I'm like, I don't care. Don't tell me about this stuff. Grow up.
Yeah, it's very childish. The congregations are often very, very immature.
And I was like, why do I enjoy the people out more than the people in? That was something that always was on my mind. Like, people will tell me, don't you want to be a ministerial servant? I'm like, nah, I want to be a pioneer for life. I don't want to deal with these babies. They don't know what to do. Because I also became very set by the rules. So, I became exactly what I didn't want my mom to become. I was like, I had friends that will dress a certain way, and I'm like, why are you dressed like that? You don't look good at all. Like, you should wear this and the tie this way, and the suit should match with your pants, and all this, because you become that. You become the thing that you shouldn't become. Is what you become. Or like, I had this friend that I love him to death. He let me borrow a PS3 game. I think it was BioShock Infinite, and it was very bloody. Like, there was one time there was like this giant saw went through the skull of a guy, and you could see the blood coming out. So I went with my cerebral sword, and I went like, hey, the Bible says this, and the blood, and blah 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 blah. I became that, and people didn't like me. Once again, I fell into this isolation period where I thought I was right and everybody was wrong, even in my congregation. And I started feeling alone again. And I will go to a meeting and look around, and nobody will come and say hi. And some of them would. And one time I got one of them really pissed at me because I said something like, hey, I want to be in your place, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I can't. And I'm like, you always make excuses. And there I was, like, imposing my will on people. And he came right at my face. And I remember I cried because I thought I lost a friendship there. And it was all the programming. Is like, you wanted to be the best version of you, so you became the worst version of you by following the rules of the organization. And it was insane. It was crazy.
Yeah, you become the best version of them.
Yes.
You become what they are, and as a reflection of the organization, you become a judgmental jerk. You become, I mean, I was too. I get it. I was always, looking at other people and, like you said, are they wearing a full suit or just khakis and a sport coat? How much do they really want it? How much do they care? And you start differentiating people based on these simple external observations. And really, that's how the congregation is run. People are making external observations about people and thinking that they know people based on that when they have no real relationship. It's all superficial.
Right. And I was like, you will see a Mercedes Benz from an elder and you will be like, what does he do that is he a materialistic guy? Like, what the hell? I will hear sisters like the circuit overseer that I admire so much. And I if I wasn't being shunned, I probably will still talk to him. He's a nice guy. And he had a Rolex that somebody gave him. And then after we finished preaching, I went to some sisters, elderly sisters, and they were like, oh, well, did you see this guy? Like in Puerto Rico, they say fulano de tal with that Rolex. How does he have money to buy that? I thought they were getting paid by the organization for their monthly expenses. And I will be like, shut up. You don't judge the circuit overseer. That's the one that Jehovah is sending for us to be helped. It was it was really interesting. Like, now that I think about it, it was really, really interesting time for me.
Yeah, I had a friend who had a BMW. He was in a rural congregation, and the brothers and sisters of the congregation literally refused to go out in service in his BMW. They refused to ride in his materialistic car. He had to, now this was a used Beamer that he had to sell it and spent more money buying a Honda Odyssey minivan. That was acceptable so that he could take people out in service. So he ended up spending a lot more money on a minivan to take people out in service and had to get rid of the BMW that he actually liked. That was a 4-door car and it held people and it ran great and he loved it. But it was all about, again, it all comes down to appearances.
Yes.
And they're completely obsessed with that.
You cannot be humble by nature. You have to be humble by appearance.
Yes.
And then so my pioneer year, my first pioneer year was the happiest. Then I went to pioneer school. I actually enjoyed pioneer school. It was a different experience as a Jehovah's Witness. For those of you that don't know what a pioneer school is, it's basically you go through all your publications, that a book that is not even supposed to be private, because all it has is just, hey, you want to answer this question? So here is the link. So you can click on it and read the publication that everybody else has so that you can study it. So you're not missing anything if you're a Jehovah's Witness, actually. And it was an interesting time because I never been the person to study a lot. I think what made it easier for me not to go to college was the fact that I hated studying. I never been a person that enjoys studying unless he's interested in the topic. And then I become like unstoppable because I learn it very quickly. So I see you doing this, so yeah. I guess you do the same.
I feel you. I'm the exact same way. I feel you.
So what I did when I became addicted to studying publications, what I did, I will touch the topics that I wanted to learn about. That was my trick. It wasn't like, oh, I want to read the whole Bible, the silver sword completely. It was more like, oh, I like this verse. Let's go into it, But anyways, that was the first time I actually studied a lot. And I met some of my friends in there from the organization. And then, funny story, the circuit overseer that told me about my pornography and was one of my teachers, which was hilarious because he didn't even remember he had that conversation with me, supposedly. So I told him, like, you know, I admitted to him, like, hey, you said I will fall. I did fail again. But here I am proving to you all that I made it, you know, like I'm here. Like I felt so proud because I was like, I proved each and every one of you wrong, you know. But in reality, it was all just pretend from my part, because I still hadn't beaten it. I still hadn't been able to accept the fact that, hey, people see that stuff. People understand that they see that stuff, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. If as long as you don't cross the line and you're honest with your partner, you should be okay. But anyways, I got out of the school, and this is where my life becomes misery. And I cannot say his name, but I'll call him Mr. J, and we'll call him like that. So Mr. J, and I'll tell you later when we are off the record, probably his name and all that, came to our congregation from Atlanta, Georgia. And he was a former Bethelite and a former elder, and he had served in the Dominican Republic, our neighbor nation to the west. And he had all of this experience. And we went preaching. I remember it like it was yesterday. The sector is called Laguna, which means lagoon in English. And we were preaching there, and he's like, I don't want you to be alarmed. You know, I have ADHD. So if I say something that, you know, I cannot hold it, just be aware. And then we went to eat in a brother's house, an elder's house, after the ministry. And he was praising me, like, he's going to be the next elder and blah, blah, blah. And so my best friend, which is another one we're going to go into later, another best friend I have, which was friends with the guy who fell in love with the young girl. We were looking for work. And you know how Jehovah's Witnesses work. Either you work with a witness or you find a low income type of work. So we did auto detailing, and we went into car dealers, and we will offer our services and clean the cars and make them look amazing, which to his credit, Mr. J was really damn good in making cars look like freaking brand new. It was amazing. But then I started to notice his real behavior. Nothing was ever too good for him. He wanted done, and problems started happening at work, and then they translated to the congregation, because that's how it always works. It starts at work, and then everybody rat tails to the congregation, and everybody learns about it. So it was like, you're not fast enough. You're not quick enough. You made a mistake there. Go fix it. Hurry, hurry, hurry. We're on a time schedule. I told you to do this. You didn't do that. You do this instead. I was 20, 21 or 22 years old already. And that was technically my first job experience was at 20 years old. Imagine that, 20-year-old Daniel when normally kids go to college at 18 and start working on their 20s, or other kids start working earlier than that. Here I was at 21, 22 years old, doing my first job. And it was hard. It was like, but why do we have to? No, you don't understand the world from the people from the world. They'll criticize you and judge you, and they'll be like, why is this kid not doing what his boss want him to do? And blah, 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 blah. And you have to think ahead. And if he listens to this ever, he'll probably deny all of the allegations and tell me I'm a liar and, gossiper and all that sort of good stuff. But it came to a point that I felt persecuted because it was always me. Why can't you listen to this? No, it's not that way. It's this way. But people have to remember, yeah, their instructions is a job, but I'm a guy that was raised without a father, with a single mother who wasn't taught how to do labor until later on I became an LDC guy who worked on constructions for the organization, and the rhythm and the treatment was quote unquote sorta different from a real job environment. So this all took me like a huge hit. And then there was times that I went home crying because why is this guy being so mean? He's my brother. Like, he should be a little bit more compassionate instead. And then every time he saw he offended me, he will come and say sorry and explain his reason. Like, he wasn't wrong, but he's still sorry. And it started to feel like manipulation of my emotions. Like, I will feel like this, and then he will lift me with the sorry, and then I will do something else wrong, and he will drop me right down, and then he will pick me right back up. And it felt like a freaking roller coaster. And literally, it started to transmit to the congregation. And by this time, I was starting to be trained to become a ministerial servant. So I was right up the ladder. Like, I was getting up there, and I had a lot of knowledge of the Bible and all this and how things were done in the organization. So I was doing the sound system one day, and I noticed there was a noise, but I've been trying to control it because, for crying out loud, the goddamn system was really old. My grandfather bought the fucking land of that fucking Kingdom Hall. The Kingdom Hall was from the 1960s. For crying out loud, the system was fucking old. I was doing what I could with what I had. So I'm trying to make the system work and trying not to have the microphones do noise, and we all know this struggle. He comes without being a ministerial servant, without being instructed by the elders. He goes into my work area and he starts touching the buttons himself. Like, you don't know how to do it. I know how to do it. I'll do it. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to. And there was an elder right behind us, in front of us, and he started paying attention like, this is not right. But they never got up and do anything about it. And if Jehovah's Witnesses are very structured. If I'm doing microphones, nobody should be doing microphones because I was the one supposed to do them. So they take that shit seriously. So I took my job like every other JW would, very, very seriously. And, I was very offended by that. But then another time I went to pray First time I prayed on the platform, I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, what a privilege. I'm going to be praying in front of the crowd. And I did a wonderful prayer. And people were like, oh my God. Like when I talk to Jehovah, and this is many, even my fiance knows this, because I still believe in a higher power, even though I'm not a witness. When I pray to God, I have a conversation with him. It's not like just repeating stuff, even though I do that, you know, with my fiance. She's Catholic, so we do pray the model prayer, how Jehovah's Witnesses recognized it. And I liked it because it's a cultural thing for them, and I respect that and I love that. But my prayers were more like a conversation. Like I will tell him how my day was going, and I will tell him like what I felt about the meeting and blah, 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 blah. I got down from the platform, everybody was crazy. Like, oh my God, Daniel, what a privilege. That's so awesome. Ah, la, 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 la. He comes in and he's like, you took too much attention for yourself, and prayers shouldn't be about that. Prayers should be about him, not you. And I was like, but I honestly did what I thought was right. I was just trying to be me up there. Like, no, you have to be more humble.
And this is all coming from a man who has no humility and who is overtaking your job and telling you how to do everything. He's clearly projecting his own stuff onto you. He's got his own issues and he's trying to make them yours.
Yeah, so it came to that point when that happened, I wasn't enjoying being a witness anymore. One time I commented on a meeting, that was another time, and I raised my hand and I said, Jehovah and Jesus help create the whole universe. They are co-creators. He's like, where do you read that from? They're not co-creators. Jehovah's the creator. Where do you hear that from? Where did you read that at? And I was like, well, the Bible does say, or our beliefs do say, that Jesus is the one through everything was created. Mm-hmm. So I thought saying a co-creator was appropriate. That's not in the publications. You're very close to the line of apostasy. Boom.
That guy was a grade A jerk. I mean,
oh yeah,
oh goodness.
Yeah, but I was starting to be afraid of him, because everything I would do, it was like, that's not good. That's not good enough. This is not good enough. You have to be more humble. You have to be more humble. You have to be more humble. And we were back at work one day, and we were doing this boat, and it was looking amazing. We were like sanding it and then polishing it, and it had like a bar that was like very shiny. And he's like, hey, we cannot use the, how do you call that? Anyway, the machine to polish, we cannot use that on this because it's a little old. So we'll use this liquid and then just pass it, and it will look better, but it won't look as we wanted it to, but it will look better. So use that. So I start using it with a paper and cleaning and doing that. And I'm very excited and all that. And it's looking gorgeous, like amazing. So the boss of the owner of the dealership comes in, and he talks to him, and he shows him the boat. Like, hey, I want you to see our product, what we're doing. And Mr. J shows him everything. And he went to him, and they finished talking. And he's like, oh, high-fiving me and high-fiving my other friend, my best friend. He's like, hey, that's what we want. We want them to be pleased and this and this and that. I'm like, man, there's only one regret I have. And he's like, what? Well, honestly, if we could have just polished it, if we could have, that was the key word, could have polished it, it would have looked even more amazing. He's like, are you criticizing my way of doing things? I told you we couldn't polish that. That was the first thing I told you that we couldn't do. Why are you questioning my authority in front of all the employees of this dealership? And I'm like, I'm just saying that it would have looked better if we could. You have to think like they think. They'll think that you're challenging my authority. And my best friend was quiet. And I have my fist like this. I was like, obviously, hands down, my fists were crunched. And he's like, oh, so now I'm the bad guy? What are you going to do? Now I'm the bad guy? Is that it? Okay. Okay. So he walked away. My best friend looked at me. He felt defenseless, which I wish he would have said something, but he didn't. I looked at him. I went away. I went to the back of the dealership and I punched the wall like 2 or 3 times. I started crying. I prayed to Jehovah because I was like, if he says anything else, I'll fucking punch him in the face. I don't care if I get arrested. I don't fucking care. This guy is a jerk.
Sounds like a narcissist.
Yeah. So we finished and I try to put it in the back of my head. And he starts apologizing. No, you have to understand that worldly people and blah, 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 blah. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. By this time, I quit. I didn't come back to work because I couldn't take it. But I knew there was no avoiding him in the fucking congregation. So he continued and continued and continued. There was one time, I swear to God, man. And I don't know if my family will see this. I don't know if they should, but my aunt and I, we were pioneers together, and I love her to death. Like, she was my best friend, and I would share everything with her. And she was going through this with me. We were ready to go on the ministry service, and we were ready. They were doing the prayer and dividing people into groups like we used to, like they do. And he comes in through the door. And I swear to God, my chest was like, if somebody will put my hand right on, like 2 hands in front of you and just push it down and squeeze it. I was trembling. I started to cry. I literally went outside of the Kingdom Hall. I missed the prayer. I went right into the car and I was crying uncontrollably. And after that, every time that I was in the meeting before he was, I will look back and look at the door to see if he was coming in. And the days he wouldn't come in, I was the happiest guy in that meeting. And I will function like I normally would have. Mr. J, I think he was the main reason why I woke up later, because obviously I came to Washington, and I'll tell you that in a minute, to escape from that.
It had to be triggering. I mean, if you've been bullied a lot earlier on in life, and now you're working for someone who's essentially bullying you, it's going to bring up all of those feelings. You know, it's a trigger. It's like you've been through something traumatic and it's being triggered again. Yes. By something. The pattern is being repeated. Here you are again with someone who's treating you in this way. And yeah, it's very difficult, especially as you get older. Now I'm not a kid anymore, and I don't have to take it from you.
Yes. Yes. And back in school, like when I was bullied, I fight back.
Right.
I fought a lot in school. Like I got in a lot of fights. Like my mom will be called from work and say, "Hey, he got into a fist fight again because they were bullying him." Like when I was in school, I was very volatile. Like I couldn't control my anger. And like one time this guy was bullying me and I pushed him to the blackboard because it was back when we used that white chalk. Mm-hmm. And I pushed him to the back, like the room. The teacher wasn't there, and you can see the letters in the back of his shirt from what the teacher had wrote. And thank God the teacher was merciful, and I had good teachers. But yeah, it was a trigger, but this time I couldn't fight back.
Yeah.
Because it was like, if I fight back, I go to the elders. If I go to the elders, I lose everything I worked on my own for. And I didn't want to risk it. And so this is where it gets worse. So I start venting with witnesses. And I'm like, hey, I'm going through this. And this guy, I don't like him. I feel afraid of him. Like I can't be myself. Somehow it got to him. He told me, this is what he did. You have to go to those people you told that about me, that you were afraid of me. And you have to go and apologize to each one of those for saying lies about me. And you know what good dumbass Mr. Daniel did? He actually went and talked to those people and humiliated himself and asked for forgiveness to them.
It's interesting how when you're in a cult, a cult has a very strong narcissistic type of personality. And they can get you to do things that you wouldn't ordinarily do.
Yeah.
And there are people inside the cult that bear the same type of personality. And so when they enter your life, you find yourself again at the mercy of these people, because you don't know how to have healthy conflict or how to deal. And really, there is no truly healthy way because you can't set a boundary with someone like this. They're just going to cross it. They don't respect you or anything about you. They don't care. So they're going to do what they're going to do anyway. And you end up subservient to them. It's just another abusive situation. And I'm sorry that it ended up, because, it's one of those things that pushes you to do something you don't want to do. And then later, you feel humiliated because you were pushed into this situation again psychologically.
So after that one, I started talking to the elders about it. I'm like, hey, this guy is crossing a lot of lines. And they're like, no, we have heard from other brothers, especially young brothers, that they don't feel good about him and this and this and that. And I was like, what are you going to do about it? Like, you guys have to do something about this, because and I put my position in there. I'm like, I'm a ministerial servant and I'm being bothered by this guy, and you guys are not doing anything about it. You know about all of this and you're not doing anything. They're like, no, but we'll talk to him. So like what happens in school with a bully, if you tell the principal that you're being bullied and the kid learns about it, they fight back. They're like, oh, you went to the principal. Oh, guess what? I'm going to continue bullying you even more because you're saying this about me. So he literally did that. He's like, oh, so you went to talk to the elders. Okay. You want me to tell them about your problems? Because I will literally tell the elders, and I will literally literally you will lose your responsibilities. And I'm like, God damn it. Like, he has me by the horns and there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can, like, I didn't think in my mind that fighting back was a good idea until later on. So this keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening. And I go back to work with him because I was in necessity. And he was paying me $25 for a day. And then when I came back, he paid me $50 a day. Very little. But back in Puerto Rico, you didn't need a lot. You just needed money to pay for gas. And so I came back, and he tried not to do the same behavior he once did with me at work. But then one time he's like, there's still this spot missing, and there's still this spot missing. And just by saying that, I just bent on my knees and I put my hands like this and I started crying. And that's when I knew I can't do this anymore, because it was an anxiety attack by that's anxiety. But anyways, I left with him, working with him, which I worked like only 2 days with him after I came back with him. 2 more days and that was it. 2 or 3 days, something like that. And then the elders had the bright idea. I already was named a ministerial servant, which was another joyful day for me in the organization, because I was proud of it. I was named a Sunday a ministerial servant. I was told by the elders that I was going to be a ministerial servant on a Sunday. It was the same Sunday that the Cleveland Cavaliers won their first NBA championship back in 2018. And I was rooting for LeBron James, so I remember that day very, very well. The block and me becoming a ministerial servant. So, so after all this happens, I'm excited. I'm like, oh, now I'm in a position, like, you know, in power and all that. And they had the bright idea, man, to tell me that I was going to be the service, below the service overseer. So I was going to take care of the territory cars and all that. So a year later, like something like that, a few months or a year or whatever, they named him a ministerial servant. And they gave him my job. And they told him and me, you're going to work together and you're going to make new territories for the congregation. Oh, man. That's when I started seeing a lot of things in the house. The way his wife was very submissive, so to speak. And my aunt would notice it too and tell me, "Do you see what he did, what he said?" And I'm not going to go into their private life because that's none of my business. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, "Will you do that to your wife?" I'm like, no. But that's him. That's how he is. And so fast forward a little bit, we're supposed to change that position. I'm supposed to give him this stuff so he can continue with the territories and give him that. So he's like, "Hey, I told the service overseer, you're supposed to give it to him." I'm like, okay. So I grabbed the folder and I give it to the service overseer. He comes one meeting and he's like, you told me you gave the folder to the service overseer. You're a liar. You didn't give anything to him. I'm like, I gave him a folder. No, you didn't give him anything. You're lying. And blah, 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 blah. I'm like, yes, I gave him the old territories folders to him. He's like, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the new territories you and I were working at. Where are those? You told me you gave it to him. I'm like, no, I just gave him the old territories. I thought those were the ones I had to hand out, and I forgot about the new territories. Well, you're lying, and you lied in front of an elder, and you lied in front of Jehovah. That was a moment that by that time, I was already ready to leave to Washington State, because there's this other elder who came from Ottawa, Washington, a small town in Washington State, and he saw my potential and he wanted me to move where the need was greater, because they only had 3 elders and 100 and something congregation and just 1 ministerial servant, and he didn't even speak Spanish. So I was like, okay, I'll see what I can do. I told my aunt, give me the keys. What for? We're in the middle of the meeting. Give me the keys now. So I went back home 5 minutes and I grabbed the folder and I gave it to him. And I said, you and I are going to have a conversation outside after all this is done. And this was the first time I stood up to him. And I'm like, what's the big deal? You're calling me a liar in front of an elder. You're calling me a liar in front of the congregation. When all of this was a misunderstanding, that I didn't know I had to give both territories to the elder because I forgot or I didn't understand that. And you're telling me that I'm a liar when I was telling you the truth, that I have given the territories to this elder, and now you're confronting me about it. And then you bring back what has happened with us from before, which you and I have talked about it, which right away, he accused me of gossip. And I had to talk to an elder and a witness because of him. And I told him, we already went through that. We already forgave each other for that. And yet you brought it up. Doesn't the Bible say that you have to forget about that sort of behavior, that sort of situation, and move forward? What is wrong with that? And he was like, whoa. Because I knew I was ready to fight, because I was going to leave in a few days. I didn't have anything to lose anymore. It was like my escape was imminent. This brother from Ottawa paid my trip. I just had a few days before I got out of that congregation. So I was like, I'm fighting. I don't give a shit anymore. No, I care about you because, you know, I see you as my son and I'm trying to help you and blah, 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 and nya, 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 nya. I'm like, okay, I forgive you. But just know that from now on, you do something like that, I'm going to confront you about it. Because you're not my dad. So that was 1 week before I left. This is another part of my story before coming here. Hurricane Irma, the first hurricane to hit Puerto Rico, came that very same week of my trip to Washington State. And we were in our houses, like, you know, and trying to see if Irma was going to avoid us, which it did. It passed through the north of the island. And I'm like, man, my trip is going to be ruined. No, no, no. I want to get out of here so bad. So I literally, was praying to God, like, please send this storm away. So we had our last meeting on Tuesday because the hurricane was supposed to come in through Wednesday or Thursday, sort of like that. So we had our last meeting on Tuesday, and he confronted me outside, and he's like, hey, why are you going to Washington State? I'm like, that's none of your business. Oh, because when I was younger, I used to like women, and I wanted to have somebody to date. That repression of your sexuality and you dating, I wanted to date, and I was honest with God. I want to have sex. I want to be with somebody I love, and I want to explore. So I had like this, how witnesses happen that when you go to another congregation to visit, they tell you, oh, you're just here for the sisters,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So I had like kind of that reputation that I will visit congregations for that purpose, which in part was true, but also in part I wanted to make friends too. And that shouldn't be shameful or anything. You're just exploring. So anyway, he's like, well, over there in Washington, you have to be careful with the Mexicans. Oh, those Mexican girls, they'll jump on you if they had the chance, and then you will fall in love with them, and they will take you out of the organization. And I'm like, listen, I know what I'm getting myself into because I've been warned. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but whatever. And if I do, that's my situation to fix and to solve. Okay, take care, have a nice trip. And then Mr. J say goodbye. And well, funny story. We avoided Hurricane Irma. I was able to take the trip to Washington State. I was welcome. It was a new start. And I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, I'm out of Puerto Rico. I don't have to see Mr. J anymore. Oh my God, I was head over the moon. Then I get to Mattawa. And then when I get to the town, I'm like, I want to get out of here. It was a small town. The only thing it has is a Subway as a fast food. It has probably 3 gas stations, 2 in the town, and then 1 at the further neighborhood, which is for American white people, not for the Mexicans that live in the town and build the town, but for the people that wanted to come from Seattle and visit, which I have no problem with, but nice people there too, but that's the reality of America. And a lot of farms, a lot of apples and cherries, and very agriculture-based town, which now is my second home. I love it there now, but when I came in the first time, I was like, holy shit. And then a week after I came, we had a circuit assembly. Then Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. I didn't know of my mom and my family for days. No power, no telephone, nothing, no contact. There was this nice lady in Mattawa, a sister, older lady. I love her to death, and I will always say that no matter what, because she gave me a room to live in for a few months. She gave me food, and when I went to that hurricane shit, she was there. And I cried on her lap because I didn't know where else to cry. I was by myself. And that was hard. because I didn't know how my mom was. And this is all in the name of Jehovah. Like, you do this, you get away from your family, you get away from your culture to come and help another congregation, to escape the asshole Mr. J in Puerto Rico. And then all of a sudden, man, you're like, damn. So, you know, and that's one of the reasons why. You must have other questions. I don't know if you have other.
You gotta say. So, how was your mom? Was she okay? And your aunts?
Yeah,
You
they
leave
were
everybody
good.
hanging.
No, they were good. They were good. A tree in the back of the house fell, and the fence went down a little bit, but the house was fine. But they were good. They were good. It's kind of interesting, man, because it was a tough time. You know, I just wanted to hop on a plane and come back to Puerto Rico because I didn't know how my mom and my aunt were, and by that time I was still a witness, so I wouldn't have been shunned or anything. So, yeah.
So now you're back. You're not back, but you're in the United States. You're in Washington. You're in the new congregation. You're sitting here talking to me, so things obviously didn't go super great. So what is your path out from there? Because that wasn't even really that long ago. You know, what are we talking? Late 2018? Something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what happened in the next months that led you out? What, I mean, obviously you weren't having a great time anyway, in certain ways, but you were sincere in what you were doing.
Yes.
So how did you end up waking up and getting all the way out?
So, so I went to Mattawa, and as you know, when you go to another country, you tend to think about it as a new beginning, as a Jehovah Witness for you, because you're in a new territory, you have to make new friends, you have to learn a new, probably for some people like Amber, you have to learn a new language. In my case, it was more like I had to get used to the Mexican culture, which is similar but different from Puerto Rican culture. And one of the things I noticed right away, the elders in the congregation in Mattawa didn't understand completely the situations the brothers in Mattawa were in. There were a lot of immigrants, which, you know, is a country where there's a lot of hardworking farmers that don't have a visa, or they're here illegally. Some of them, many brothers in that congregations are, and they didn't understand that they had to work sometimes 7 days a week, every single day, probably instead of 8 hours, sometimes 10, 12, 16 hours in the fields. And one of the things that I noticed was I learned how to listen better, even though I wasn't great at it, because we're not good at listening as witnesses for some reason. I don't know if you had that experience yourself. That, yeah.
There are definitely a lot of witnesses caught up in themselves, and they struggle to listen. And that's just because of the environment.
Correct. So I started to listen to them instead of the elders. They're like, hey, I have family I have to work for. I have to be at the field 7 days a week. And I will say, like, well, I can't understand what you're going through because I'm not in your situation. There's no way I can empathize with you, like be kind to you, but there's not a lot I can relate to you about that. So, you know, but I do find it weird that they're not, you know, very considerate about that. Because the problem was, well, they're not going to the meetings enough. They're not preaching enough. They should be here every week, every day, you know, and they're like, we can't. We have things to buy. We have things to do. There's a life outside of the witnesses. And you know, which is funny because that's going to lead to another conversation I had with one of them after I left, which was an amazing conversation. And I never thought I would have a conversation with a witness after leaving, but I did. And it was in Mattawa. So the people in Mattawa, my heart goes to them. So I started to see the elders differently. No, not differently, the same way as in Puerto Rico. A lot of talk, very little doing. And I was like, I want to be different. I want to be the elder who listens. I want to be the elder who is like, hey, it's okay if you miss a few minutes, you know, but, you know, it's important to be here, but we understand, you know. I wanted to be that elder. I wanted to be that guy. And, but then I started seeing patterns and patterns and patterns. You start to see behind the curtain, so to speak. Because in this congregation, unlike mine, I had to do a lot more stuff that was only reserved to elders, but because of the necessity, I was doing it. Like I did the Watchtower study, I did the congregation book study, the New Life and Ministry section of the meetings. I had to do that. I literally was the chairman of many meetings in Mattawa myself. So I had a lot of responsibilities. Basically, I was an elder without the title, you know. So,
but it sounds like what you're seeing is that, and I think this gets to what you were saying about not listening, and that is that, so the elders are there to enforce rules and expectations. They don't care about the people. They don't see the struggles of the individual. Jehovah's Witnesses are more about control than they are love. So they don't see that you're here and you're struggling and you're working 7 days at a hard job just to survive.
Right.
It would be loving to see that and to give you grace for that and to understand that. But they just want that. All they're doing is saying, but here are the rules. Here are the expectations, and if you don't meet these, then you don't have any value.
Correct.
And so that's why people's individual stories are important. And you wanted to be that elder who was like, I actually love you. I see you. I can validate you. How can we move forward on this? That's actual love and not just control. So when you're starting to see that they don't really care about the people. It's not about the people. It's about the rules.
Correct.
How does that translate to you leaving?
So what happened was we were about to build a new Kingdom Hall in Mattawa, a more modern one, because the sister that gave me a room was the one who donated some land, and they had like a little trailer, and that was the Kingdom Hall in Mattawa. And, you know, when I started working with LDC, I had Zoom meetings like this ones. Then I started to working with the service overseer on a department for the construction. And I don't actually remember what it was, but it was more about, you know, organizing workers and calling the witnesses in the congregations that were going to volunteer and calling them, hey, this day you're supposed to come to this for this task. And if this brother had experience with this sort of task, this has to be called and all that. So I start seeing like control, sort of. They're not donating enough for this build. They're not doing enough to support the construction. They're not volunteering enough. They're not in the preaching work enough. They're not. There was this situation where, man, I felt bad. There was this guy that, and this guy, the elder that was working with me, I will call Mr. V. And Mr. V was in charge of the meeting for the ministry this morning. And this other guy was inactive for some years and came back, was trying to be active again. It was his first day back on preaching. But he had complaints about the elders and the congregation, and he was very vocal about it. So that's why they put him like on a little shelf. So we're doing the memorial campaign, I remember very well. And the elders like, if you don't have a tablet, an iPad, then you shouldn't preach because there's a video that you have to show, and you shouldn't be here if you cannot show it. And I was in the sound system because now in the ministry, whenever they wanted to practice a demonstration before going to the ministry, they put a video in front with the demonstration. I think you know how the meetings run now, that they have this little short clips and they show how to present the magazine and all that.
Right.
And I had to be in the sound system for that. So I grab a microphone and I'm like, excuse me, Mr. B, I think you're wrong. I think what the organization has said is that if you don't have a tablet or an electronic device, you can join another person who has it. And they can go together and he can help the other person show the video. And he looked stunned. It was like I challenged his authority as an elder, because I was trying to defend the brother in the congregation, because that was the loving thing to do. The brother left the meeting. He didn't go on the ministry. He left to his trailer, which was close by the way. His wife, when the whole thing finished, she was outside crying. And I went to her and I'm like, hey, what's going on? She's like, my husband is so mad. He was trying so hard to be here, and this guy said this and he got offended, and now all the work I put into him coming back and preaching door to door is out of the window because of this inept elder. And that broke me, because I was like, because I know how much effort it takes to actually get somebody back in the organization, because it happened with my mom. Mm-hmm. And back then, when I used to believe in it, I was like, oh, I want people to be here. So I went to talk to him, and he's like, oh, and he was very critical of the elder. And I'm like, but hey, calm down. Like, we're going to get through this. And then I started seeing that friction between elder and publishers. Then shit hit the fan. Mr. B was starting to complain that the brothers weren't doing enough, weren't donating enough, weren't doing enough for the construction project. He stopped going to some meetings as an elder even. And one day the LDC supervisor called me. He's like, hey, Daniel, do you have time? I'm like, yeah, sure. What's going on? I'm just calling people for the project. What's going on? He's like, Brother B is leaving to Florida soon. And he deleted all the contacts and information we have built for this construction project. I was like, what? All that work we put into, yeah, it's not in the cloud. It's not here. It's gone. I don't know what we're going to do. We have to call people up for this. And that's when I started to see the friction, the fight. By this time, I was dating somebody already. It was young, but not minor. It was, it's starting to become a young adult. And I thought I liked her, I was like, oh, so excited and this and that. Then I met this girl, which is now my fiance. And I'm like, I want a real friend. So I went and I'm like, hey, I want to be your friend. But actually, I was really attracted to her. And every day for me was a complaint about the organization. It was a complaint about the congregation, about how the elders don't care about the people. I was very disappointed with everything. And, I was so frustrated. And then this girl appeared in my life. And whenever I had a situation like that, my Jehovah's Witness girlfriend will say, leave it all in God's hand. Jehovah can do it for you. Just don't worry about it. Jehovah, have faith. All I wanted was for her to listen to me. So I started talking to my fiance, my now fiance, and I noticed something very different. She listened. And she actually was telling me, it's not all God's job, it's your job. You have to do something about stuff for that to, whatever you want to happen, for it to happen. And then emotions started to grow and all that. And then my best friend, who was the one who fell in love with the minor, and now he's married to someone his age, his father died. So I took a trip. This is how much I love that guy. I took a trip to Florida with no money. My best friend that worked with me and Mr. J, I brought him here to help me, but then he decided to live in Vancouver, Washington, and leave me in the small little town. But anyways, he paid for my trip, and we went to see him as a surprise. And in all this time, I was in Portland, Oregon, and I was talking to my now fiance on the phone. And she was telling me, hey, my love. And she knew what she wanted. But I was like, I shouldn't be doing this. Why am I doing this? Why am I talking to this person? She's not a believer. What am I doing? What's going on? So I leave and I come back from the trip. My Jehovah's Witness girlfriend and her parents were waiting for me. My car broke down before I got to their house, and everything was terrible. And to top it all off, they were like, hey, we cannot allow you to do this. We cannot allow you to do that. You cannot be with her in this situation and in this situation and in this situation. And I was like, well, I told her we couldn't be in the back of the car together, that I should sit with you as a father and your mom could sit with you in the back. But now all of a sudden it's all my fault. So the next day, I tell my now girlfriend to meet me, my now fiance to meet me in a park close to the Columbia River. Beautiful, beautiful park. And before that, I had a disagreement with my ex-girlfriend. And she ended up telling me that I was a danger to her spirituality. Because, of course, it was all my fault. I didn't warn her about my desires. I didn't warn her about what could happen if we were together alone. But it was my fault. That's typical Jehovah Witness right there. And I told my fiance, I broke up with my ex. I like you. I want to date you. And that sort of started everything. But what waked me up, so I build up to this way too much. What actually woke me up, Michael, was one conversation before that happened between me and my fiance. Was We were hiking a trail, and she asked me, what are you doing in a religion that is not making you happy? And I was like, what? She's like, religion is for you to be happy, it's for you to feel fulfilled, and for you to find purpose. But none of those factors are in your life right now. You're complaining and complaining about it. Why are you still there? Don't get mad at me. Just go and think about it. And it started bam, 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 bam. I lost the privilege of being a pioneer because my hours were so low. I didn't care anymore. And then I moved to Richland, Washington for 4 months in the summer to escape Mattawa and the congregation, because I knew my fiance is from Mattawa, so they will learn sooner or later that I was dating her. So I left. And after that, man, it was just, I felt as free as a bird, if you can tell me that. Like, I started, I don't know who was it. I know my fiance told me, hey, there's this Catholic priest that used to be a Jehovah Witness. Listen to him. And I listened to him. And then all of a sudden, I saw there was an SJW community. And then I met Brandon, and then I talked to you. Then I started to listen to Lloyd Evans. And I started reading Crisis of Conscience. But since I'm not a good reader, I couldn't get through all of it. But I don't know, it was more than good enough for me to know, like, I don't believe this anymore. Like, but it took time. It was really painful because this people, it's my fiance. These people didn't care about me. So this is what happened. Mr. J learned that I was pissed at them, that I was leaving the witnesses, because I tested my friend from Florida about it first. I told him, I don't feel like a Jehovah Witness anymore. I don't think I want to be a Jehovah Witness anymore. And then there was this guy who didn't invite me to his wedding, even though he promised that he would. And the reason I went back to Puerto Rico, besides seeing my mother, was to be in that wedding. And then he didn't have the balls to tell me. His fiance told me that I wasn't invited. I was invited to the Kingdom Hall, but not to anything else. I insulted him. I was like, where the hell were you when I had only $30 in my pocket and I was barely scratching for survival? Where the hell were you guys when I was crying in my bed because I didn't know what happened in Puerto Rico? Where the hell were you when I was supposed to know about my family and all this, and you guys didn't contact me at all? And then I hear that, oh, I'm a mama's boy, so if it doesn't go well for me here in the States, I will go back with the tail between my legs to come back to my mom. So it was one of those things that I was so angry, man. Has so much anger. And then Mr. J tests me, and I think it's Galatians, the scripture. I'm not sure, that says that we reap what we sow. That if there's a desire and it becomes fecunded, or like, then it turns to desire, and then the desire becomes a sin.
Yes.
He told me, oh, this is what you wanted all along. You got what you wanted, and I was so pissed. I tested him like, you know what? I'm going to tell you what I should tell you all those years. You're a son of a bitch. And I blocked him, and I blocked everybody else. And then I changed my phone number once, and I tested my friend from Vancouver. And then somehow he shared that number with my friend from Florida when I didn't want that. And then they started calling me and testing me, and everybody all of a sudden appeared in my life. When for 1 year in Washington State, nobody gave two hoops about me. Mm-hmm. Now all of a sudden I left, and here is everybody asking me questions, and why the hell am I doing this, and that Jehovah loves me and all this crap.
So a little too late. They're really bad about that. They profess to be this religion of love and how much they care about one another, the united brotherhood, and you think these people are your friends, and then the second that you don't do what they want you to do, they ditch you, or you can disappear. My wife and I, I know we had gone at least a year, on more than one occasion, without ever attending a meeting, and not one person ever called to see if we were alive.
Nope.
No checking in on us, no anything. I was depressed. Things were going badly in life.
Yeah.
No one cared.
Yeah, it's like that. And then my fiance's like, why don't you answer them back? Why are you blocking them? I told her, I know me. If I answer and I start talking to them, I'll feel guilty, and I'll probably leave you, and I'll probably come back running to the organization, because that's the programming kicking in. So I cannot give them even a single chance to come back in it, because if I do, I'll probably be brainwashed again, and it's all my fault. And the sad thing, when a non-Jehovah Witness dates you and you leave, not only because of them, but because of the other things that were happening in the background, sometimes they'll blame themselves. They'll be like, oh, it's all my fault, and you're suffering this, and
That's an amazing point, because all along, it's the Jehovah's Witnesses that behave badly, and everyone else ends up feeling guilty.
Yes.
Which is, they victim blame, they do all these things, and then, because they're so outside the norm of proper and healthy behavior that they make the healthy people end up feeling bad.
Right.
And your fiance didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You just want to go live your life. You want your fiance in it. She just wants you in her life. And what business is any of it of Jehovah's Witnesses? It's none of their business. So they don't get to judge you or hold anyone accountable. But it's funny how, because they're so outside the norm, everybody else feels like, well, I must be doing something wrong, because their behavior is so out there that I must be causing it. And it's not. It's just how they are. It's who they are.
Yeah, and many times, like, there were times that she cried about it. Sure. She's like, I love you and you're hurting and it's all my fault. And I had to literally stand up to her and say, it's not your fault. It was a decision I had to come to myself. I chose you and I denied them. And that's the thing, like, I gave myself the power to shun them. I was like, I'm not going to allow them to have control of that decision. I will shun them by purpose, because I want to be in control of my life. And I've been dating my fiance for 2 years now. And, we're going to get married soon, probably next year if things get back to normal, hopefully. We don't know. But literally, man, I changed so much from that 2018 to 2020, in 2 years. That is unbelievable. Like, I was in so much debt, you know, back in 2019, and my girlfriend saw me cry a lot of times because of my financial issues, and how the hell I'm gonna pay this? I don't have credit built up, so how am I gonna survive if my car breaks down? There were many times her family had to lend me a car so that I could go to work because my car broke down. And then all of a sudden, last year, boom, I turned it around. I didn't give up. I kept looking for a better job. This job pays me fairly well. I got a new car. I got credit. I am planning, we're already starting to plan a wedding and all that. And it's all because she came into my life. Sometimes people don't realize the power they have in your life and the good or the bad they can do in your life. And my fiance is the good, but the organization, most of it was the bad, because this guy, man, he didn't want to give up. He was all about, it's all your fault. I warned you about this, and I'm like, and I'm here on I'm gonna be here on YouTube and on podcasts. Yeah, you're right. I left for a Mexican woman, loving, caring, super hot, and by the way, loves me unconditionally, unlike you guys. And that's the difference. So if that's a message, I want to send a message to them in Spanish, because I want to lay it out there. Can I do that?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
A los que están en Puerto Rico, quiero que sepan, yo estoy bien, mi novia está bien. Muchas gracias por no creer en mí. Yo creía en mí y aquí estamos. So what I basically said to my friends in Puerto Rico, I'm doing okay. Here I am. She's doing okay. You didn't believe in me that I could go forward. Here I am going forward. That's all I had to say in Spanish. But you know, it was hard, man. It was really hard. Like, I don't know if you know this SJW, Bob Gray. I don't know if you heard of him. No, probably not, but he's a very great guy. I video chat with him quite a while, and he has seen me cry about it. And, you know, he's like, he was an elder for a few years, and he went out of the organization, I think probably in the 90s or 80s, and he was an elder. And one of the things that let him out was the same thing that let me out. It was the lack of love and compassion, man. You know, it wasn't even their belief.
It's what woke me up too. It was the first thing that I noticed was the lack of love, and the way that we treated people on the outside as well as people on the inside. You know, I remember thinking about how, well, I'm supposed to go to these people's doors because I love them so much. And I'm spending all this time and energy trying to save them because I love them so much. But also they're just evil, worldly people. And when I leave their house, I should shake the dust off my feet and, you know, probably talk bad about them and talk about how I want their house in the new system after God murders them. You know?
Oh man, we used to talk about that all the time.
It's messed up. It's so messed up. And you know, I just realized we don't really care about people, and love and control are two different things. And this whole thing is about control. And so now you have a loving partner in your life.
Yes.
And you have, your life is your own. You're not, I know you said, you know, like you're shunning them in a way because you put up a boundary, but at the same time, you know, if these people wanted to have a normal, healthy relationship with you, apart from being a witness, just love you for you, and you all could just talk and be friends, I'm sure you'd be open to that.
Yeah.
So my question is, now in your new life, I know you don't have these people in it anymore,
Mhm.
but you do have good things. So what do you appreciate about your new life? And is there anything that are there any dreams you have for your new life? Obviously getting married is one of them, but what do you want?
Well, man, that's a good question. I think the biggest thing I enjoy about life right now is the fact that uh, only my fiance can tell me what to do. No, she doesn't do that, but well, sometimes. But I actually enjoy the freedom to talk to every sort of people. And I don't have many friends right now because I gave up on it on a while ago. Like, if I have a friend, it will be because they really want to be with me. Because sometimes it feels like a dog chasing another dog by the tail. And it sometimes, but I do long for connection. So my coworkers, I try to be as connected with them as I can. And her family is my family now. She has a beautiful baby brother that I love a lot. Her little sister, I used to work in the school district in Mattawa, so I know her from school, and she's my little baby sister, so to speak. And you get to appreciate those things. But I always been like kind of like a historian kind of deal because of the prophecies and all that had to do with the world powers and all that. uh I really enjoy history, and right now what I'm really into is learning into why late Latin America is in the position that is in right now, especially Venezuela and countries like that don't have the power and the might that the almighty United States have. And I'm learning why that is. But I also, in the future, my fiance wants to go to France, and I too want to go to France. But I also want to go to Latin America, and I want to see the tribes, and I want to see the towns and the Alps in South America, and if we can do that, fine. If not, if not, then I'll just settle with learning about my culture. Like, I have a book arriving today that is called A Word Against All Puerto Ricans. And it's a very interesting book about history between the United States and Puerto Rico, and how the United States, even though they're a country about liberty and freedom, they have imposed a lot of stuff on Puerto Ricans because some of them want to be like the United States, free and have their own country. And so I'm interested in all that.
Yeah.
Uh, and honestly, my main goal is being the best person I can be, man. Like, I want to be a father, whether, I adopt kids or we have our own. I want to be a loving father because I never had that. I never had a parent. I had a mother, but I didn't have a father. So I want to be that. And, I think the most I want to help people, especially immigrants, Mexicans that have come through our borders and need help, and probably how to get legal, and if they need emotional help or stuff like that. And we have quite our goals, because that was mainly her goal. But now that I'm learning about Latin America, it's starting to become my goal as well. Like, be proud of my heritage and share it with the world, listen to salsa music out loud in the neighborhoods, and then, uh, her listening to banda music and rancheras, like they call them in Mexico. So I'm proud of who I am, but I have to say that, I'm very happy with my fiance, and the fact that she has shown the world to me in a different light. in the sense that she is amazing. But at the same time, there's people like you, Lloyd, Amber, and many others that help the SJWs move forward. And man, that's amazing. You know, I think I was talking to a coworker. I am bouncing more for independence for Puerto Rico than more than it becoming a state, because we think that the United States doesn't want it to become a state. So that means that I'm getting into politics, which was a no-no as a witness. But at the same time, I think the most important freedom is here. And I think supporting, and I hope that this video helps some people. And I know I talk a lot, but I hope this video helps in that, in the fact that, hey, you guys are not alone. If you're still in, you know, me and you, Michael, and Lloyd and Amber, we all gone through this, you know, Fifth himself and the others who, man, those documentaries that have been coming out, you know, this is a revolution, and I think we should keep it going. You know, I think, you know, we have to act like the Tea Party here in the United States, where the Americans grew tired of the British and they threw the tea overboard, and that's how the revolution started. This is our revolution, and we have to talk and be loud, because we need to be heard, especially those victims of sexual abuse. They need to be heard. And I think that's another thing that I want to do, is help everybody. And this video is, I think, the beginning of that.
Well, Daniel, I think like you said, I think it is the beginning of that. And I think you just helped people. And I appreciate you throwing your voice into the revolution, because it really is. You know, shunning is about shaming, and it's about keeping people quiet, taking people's voices. And that's why I do what I do. I want to give people their voice back and help them to speak out and to speak up and to be heard and validated and seen, and to help others feel the same, because you're not alone, Daniel. I'm not alone, and neither are all these other people who may watch this. So I really appreciate you sharing your story, for being honest and open about things, and I really think this is going to help some people.
We'll curse God.